Hello and welcome to this third webinar. But before we move on, I would like to focus on a few household rules. In contrast with the first and the second session, we will allow you to chat with each other. So there's a chat window there. You can chat with the other participants if you want. And you write whatever you want there. You can also raise your hands, but we will not take the questions there because you only can put the questions in the Q&A. So please be careful. If you have a question for Dries or for Tim later on, so our two speakers, then please do that in the Q&A, because if you do it in the chat window or if you raise your hands, we will not respond to that. Okay. So just like in the two previous webinars, we have 20 minutes presentation and 50 minutes Q&A. The first presenter is Dries Hens. He is a co-founder of LynxCase. LynxCase is a Belgium-based startup company who is harnessing healthcare data with the goal to improve patient outcome. He is currently serving as the company's chief business and medical officer. And Dries will talk about natural language processing and the use of unstructured data in healthcare. So what is the disruptive power of such an approach, as most medical data are unstructured and only structured data could be used so far in EPR data or whatever. So how is a company like LynxCase empowering providers to work in a patient-centric way, using relevant information from patients, medical history, and following up long time after they left the hospital? Dries, we met, we had an interview, let's say last year, that was very inspiring. LynxCase is a company that also is doing some very unusual work. I'm happy you accepted my invitation. And I give the floor to you, so please share the screen and go ahead.
All right, perfect. First of all, thanks, Wim, for having us. It's always a great opportunity to speak of things that we are really interested about. So, voila, I hope everyone can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So for today, I prepared some slides. First of all, to get a general view on what is actually the opportunity and what are the market drivers in healthcare today for health tech, and then go a little bit more into detail about, like Wim said, what is the potential of unstructured data and how did we develop with LynxCase technology that can solve that issue. But of course, like in reality, there are some challenges to implement, and especially because we're working with ecosystems, this is something, I wrote down 3 challenges that I want to further elaborate on, and then we'll have a Q&A. So Wim already introduced you. So my name is Dries Hens. I'm a medical doctor from education. So I studied 7 years of medicine in Leuven, and then decided, because I was really interested in the healthcare ecosystem as a whole, to follow a specialized master in the business school at l'ESCP in Paris. And it was a specialized master in pharmaceutical and biotech management. And I'm currently acting as a chief medical officer at LynxCase, where I want to translate really clinical unmet needs into how can we use data and as much as data as possible to improve the medical process. Just as a recap, what we do at LynxCase. LynxCase is an AI-powered clinical data platform, and what we essentially do is we build a data mining engine. So we process data, which types of data, structured and unstructured data, with the sole goal to improve patient outcomes and as well make real-world data accessible as well for life science research, because there is, of course, where the innovation comes from. Before starting, like I said, I want to start a little bit with scoping the general market drivers of health tech, because then you can directly see how come the need of reliable and good quality data is so important in whatever we do. And especially if we are discussing patient-centric approaches, your structured medical record, of course, is really important, because it's the basis of where AI tools and smart decision tools and knowledge can be shared upon. So let's start with the start, data in healthcare. I think this is something that everybody knows, of course, the healthcare problem. We have an older population, the costs are rising, and globally in the healthcare ecosystem is really under stress because how financial sustainable is our healthcare system, especially in Belgium, but also in other countries where you have different payers, of course. In Belgium, you have the government that's paying for healthcare. In the Netherlands, in the US, you have also private insurance companies. But independent on who is paying for healthcare, it's not sustainable. And not sustainable meaning it's too costly, but as well that we want to make sure that if we make it more efficient, so less costly, that the quality of care, of course, and everybody is a patient, that you get treated well. And this is, of course, a huge opportunity for data and AI in healthcare to make sure that we can solve a little bit this problem together with all the ecosystem players that are out there within healthcare. In order to scope a little bit what we are doing and why we are doing what we do with LynxCase is why is big tech moving to digital health? And you have the Googles of today, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft. Microsoft just announced as well a recent acquisition, of course, of Nuance, which is a very important player in the healthcare field. What's really important just to highlight the market drivers behind health tech is those big guys, they have one important metric, of course, and that is cloud consumption. As you know, that data in healthcare and every day it's really data explosion. So it's an industry that is really data rich. So of course, the opportunity if you have commercial cloud solutions to get as much as that data on your cloud and to do smart things with it is really interesting for those players. And that's why, of course, they as well are investing a lot of effort and time and money into the healthcare space. Second really important market driver behind tech is of course a big pharma. And this is just important to know is why is big pharma moving to digital health? It's because I scoped out a little bit the financial sustainability problem. So the healthcare ecosystem should evolve to a new payment model. And this new payment model is called value-based healthcare. So it used to be the fact that pharmaceutical companies, they get paid on volume. So if I sell 1 billion pills, then I'll get a lot of money. In the future, they won't be financially reimbursed only based on volume, but really on the value that they generate for individual patients. And in order to make this a little bit more concrete, is how do you define value in a healthcare ecosystem? And it's essentially the sum of outcomes. So how good is a patient after treatment or after getting a pill or after, for example, using a digital health application, plus the patient experience. So how satisfied is a patient with a certain treatment divided by cost. So you see directly that if you switch from a volume to a more value-driven healthcare ecosystem, that there's a lot of opportunities to generate new solutions, use, for example, digital health tools to make sure that the outcomes of a certain patient increase, independent on the pill that is actually being delivered. So that's why, of course, big pharma companies are interested and are acquiring as well health tech companies, because with their pill and a digital solution, the total value equation will be much more positive, and thus the total solution, including their pill, will generate more money. But this is a good story because it will generate as well the best outcomes for us as individual patients at a total cost that is maintainable, financially maintainable. And this is, of course, a really important market driver to understand why data and AI, for example, in radiology and so forth, become so important. Because the main driver of value is outcomes divided by cost. This is essentially a data problem. And this is, of course, where technology like ours within LynxCase comes into play. So this brings me directly into what is the importance of unstructured data in a value-based healthcare system. Like I said, if you're evaluating a new product, a pill, new therapy, or the quality that a hospital delivers, for example, it will be on value, and the reimbursement will be based on value. And in order to make the value equation, you need a lot of data, and you need a lot of outcome data. And this is actually where the cruxis is today, and where, of course, also the difficulties are within the healthcare ecosystem. So this is a little bit the reason why we created LynxCase, to solve a certain problem. And to solve a certain problem is the reuse of routine healthcare data today is not really 100% being used. And the problem is a multitude. And in order to grasp you on the problem is that a hospital information system, they have structured data and they have unstructured data. And in order to make it a little bit more visual, so on the left side, you see actually the big problem is that 80% today of data within hospitals is not being used. And this is a huge problem. If you know that the healthcare ecosystem is changing from a volume to a value perspective, then of course a lot of hospital data concerning outcomes should be made available and should be made reused to make sure that this model really can be put into practice. So the problem is, and I always look at a hospital information system like your own desktop. You have Word files, you have Excel, you have PDFs, and so forth. But if you want to answer a question where there is important information in your Word format, in a PDF, in an Excel, then you have to process data to answer a certain question. And in order to process data like we do today within healthcare, this is mainly historically a manual effort. So you have a lot of people working inside of hospitals. They're going to look through medical records and extract certain relevant data points and put it in a type of database, in a type of Excel. The problem, however, of course, is that this manual process is not scalable because you can do 100 patients, which is a lot of work. But secondly, as well, is that it's prone to errors. So if I ask you to extract, for example, 10 data points out of medical records, I'm 100% sure that there will be differences, and this is logic. It's a human process, so we make faults and we make errors, and this is where we as LynxCase saw a lot of opportunity to use AI, and AI essentially in our business is mimicking an existing manual process to make sure that we develop a data processing engine that with the same quality than a human process can do, that we can extract really relevant information to make sure that, for example, outcomes in a value-based healthcare system become accessible in multiple hospitals and so forth. So this is really where we as LynxCase making a difference within healthcare. And what we essentially are doing for a hospital is our technology is continuously processing and curating data and making really big and granular databases available to optimize the quality of care. How did we do that? So our company, we started with developing targeted NLP algorithms. So NLP stands for natural language processing. So what it essentially does is it's going to mimic an existing human process. So imagine that you work in a cardiology department, you have a data nurse, which is the type of nurse that within a hospital is going to look to patient records, and she's going to extract relevant data points because they want to use it in clinical research. What our technology essentially does is we mimic the process of a data nurse, so independent of the source. So on the left side, you have clinical notes, which is typically, if you go to a doctor, then he will write down certain history. He will write down your medical history, write down your symptoms and so forth. which are mainly unstructured. So today, 80% of hospital data is unstructured, so in this format. And then, of course, you have, for example, lab data. If you get your blood tests, these are semi and structured data sources. But the goal is, of course, to make sure that you can get an algorithm as accurate as possible, and that you can extract and generate databases that are really relevant to be used for example, value-based healthcare. And this is where we as LynxCare make a difference, because we create per disease area targeted NLP algorithms. So for example, in heart failure, we have an algorithm. In multiple myeloma, which is an hemato-oncology, we developed algorithms. And these algorithms, they work independent of the source. So it doesn't matter to us which systems that the hospitals are using. The same algorithm is going to process the data the same way, and as well, eventually, is going to store them as well in an international compliant format. So what we did was, our core USP in the beginning with LynxCare was the natural language processing. So the possibility of extracting unstructured data points and code them to specific international standards. But more and more, we embedded our technology into an end-to-end platform that hospitals today use. And you can, I always love the comparison with a washing machine. So imagine that you have a washing machine at home. You have dirty laundry, which is in different colors. You put them into a washing machine, you set up your program, and at the end you have clean clothes, for example. And this is a little bit the same what we do with healthcare data. So we ingest a lot of PDFs, words, comorbidities, clinical notes, lab data into our processing engine. Our processing engine knows which data points are relevant. For example, for a heart failure patient, we extract the data points for the hospital, and for the hospital we create a clinical data warehouse, like we call it. It's a type of database where you have which we also use as a coding mechanism to make sure that the data that is being stored over there can be shared over multiple hospitals, so that our knowledge as well in certain disease areas can easily be shared, which of course is of real importance if you want to optimize certain treatment outcomes on a larger scale than just one hospital. So this is essentially what we have built with LynxCare, and to make it a little bit more easier to understand is I want to explain you 2 use cases that we did in the past. So this is, for example, an example of a cardiology center, which is quite known in Belgium, and they had a lot of data historically. But the problem was, and they are a high volume center, so they do a lot of procedures, that they couldn't answer questions like how many ablations do we need to treat the patients, what are the predictors of success, and more importantly, what are the predictors of failure. What's really important to highlight is that you need to process a lot of data in order to get seamlessly simple questions to be answered. And what we did over there was we mined around 84 million data points. It's just one department in one hospital. So you directly see the volume that you can generate using such platforms as LynxCare. And we did work that normally would take a manual person 15 years. And we decreased the time to insights to 3 days. And right now, for example, if you go to the data-driven cardiology department at AZ Delta, based on your individual patient profile, they will directly see and learn as well from their history what would be the best treatment for you as a patient. In which treatment or which types of complications should we be aware of? Because based on your population, based on your profile, for example, if you have a history of diabetes, then they learned from their past patients that there's a high risk of developing a type of infection, for example, in the future. And just by making sure that good structured data is available by using our processing engine, we can generate the insights that physicians need to decide together with the patient which is the optimal treatment. And this is really the core of what LynxCare does and what we want to change within the healthcare ecosystem, that evidence-based guidelines, for example, in healthcare, can be more and more personalized guidelines based on your own patient profile. What did we learn in the past, and what can we do to optimize a certain outcome? And this is really the basis how healthcare data should be used at first. Another one is, for example, quite recent with COVID-19. As it's a new pandemic, everybody knew that data, at a certain moment, data in healthcare became quite visual, because it's really important, of course, to make sure that you make the right decisions as a country. But from a clinical perspective, we got the questions of a lot of pneumologists in Belgian hospitals saying, we want to collaborate with a few hospitals and we want to make a central database. We have a lot of medical records already available, but unstructured. Can you help us, LynxCare, in structuring the data and making sure that we as medical decision makers have as much as information that we can possibly have to make sure that we make the right decisions, because it's a new disease. We don't really know a lot about it, only in research publications, but they really want to see their own population being built up. And this is what we are currently still doing. Why is this relevant? Because right now, if you enter a hospital based on the symptoms that you have, as well as also comorbidity, they can actually calculate as well the risk of for example, your profile to generate complications, whether or not you will be admitted to the ICU in the future, whether or not you will need mechanical ventilation. But also interesting and also very important, in the long term, we'll also see the long-term effects of people that went through a COVID-19 hospitalization and see whether or not there are a lot of long-term problems with the lungs, or with, for example, in certain cardiology problems. And this demonstrates the need of platforms like ours that can work in multiple hospitals and can really generate at a larger speed insights to clinical data. This is hopefully a little bit interesting, and this shows you as well how we use AI to increase the data processing capabilities within the healthcare ecosystem. But with all new innovations and with AI in healthcare and so forth, comes, of course, also a lot of challenges. I just want to resume on three main challenges that we saw in the ecosystem that are holding the implementation of technology like ours a little bit back. And this is something that's also great stuff to discuss, of course. Challenge one, healthcare data is complex. I don't think there are a lot of other data industries that are more complex than healthcare, because you need a lot of knowledge at first, medical knowledge, you need a lot of data analytical knowledge, and then you have computing power and IT power that you need to combine in order to solve specific problems. So of course, that healthcare data is complex. We all know it. And this is actually the first challenge that where LynxCare really is addressing the market, because we want to make sure that we can help hospitals in guiding them through the data processing and data storage problems. And this is, for example, a quote from a CIO from a hospital, so Chief Informatics Officer of a hospital. They know they have a lot of data, but the challenge isn't the volume, it's the integrity, the usability, and the quality of that data. So this is a problem that we are tackling with LynxCare, but of course there are other challenges as well, keeping companies like ours, but also AI and radiology companies from a full adoption. And challenge two is, for me, it's unclear data strategy and governance structure. As LynxCare mainly works with hospitals, we identified three blocks that needed to alleviate, or hurdles that need to go away. You have to know that if innovation comes to hospitals and or data providers and healthcare systems as a whole, they need to think about three things. And the one is they already should have a clear data and analytics strategy. So a lot of hospitals right now are evaluating how they want to work with data, how they want to maximize the potential and the value of data. But of course, if they don't have a clear strategy, it's quite difficult for us as commercial companies with a platform to really fit our positioning into their data analytics strategy. So this is really important that the industry and mainly hospitals and, for example, also the payers and the governments, they should have a clear data and analytics strategy, what they want to do with the data and why. The second one is really important as well, is a data governance structure. If you're handling very sensitive information like we do with LynxCase, patient information, medical records, and so forth, you have to make sure that if you build up a database, that for primary and secondary use, that the data as well can be used for that specific hospital. And what I mean with that is that hospitals themselves, they should have a clear data governance structure in place, determining how and in which projects that they want to engage with data companies like ours. This is really important because you need to have a process or a protocol in place within your hospital to make sure that, for example, GDPR-wise, privacy compliance, etc., that there's a vast process to be followed and a protocol so that every stakeholder within a hospital is aligned. Because, of course, if we discuss ecosystem, you have a lot of different stakeholders in a specific hospital that have other opinions, so it's really important to have them grouped in a data governance structure so it's clear what they can do with data and how they're going to use data. And then third, of course, is third-party positioning. It's a little bit, for us as companies, as third parties, for example, for hospitals, it's really important, of course, that you position yourself within the data analytics strategy of the hospital as well as with the data governance structure of the hospital. But these are things that are quite new, so they will take up some time. Some hospitals are leading the way and others are following. But if there's one thing that I could recommend is that hospitals really, for the first two steps, really start working on this, because the value and the potential of data is, of course, only visible if you can use it with the right intentions. And if everything is getting blocked, then a lot of innovation in terms of AI in healthcare and so forth won't happen in the near future. This is why this, for me personally, is really important. Challenge 3 is data trust and transparency. As with in each industry, whether it's healthcare, finance, or whatever, data trust needs to be at the center. And I'm maybe speaking a little bit as a physician at this moment. But the first key stakeholder to get insights into a lot of healthcare data should be the one that makes, together with the patient, a decision to do to get a certain treatment, to do a certain surgery, and so forth. As data is really broad, and as our technology, for example, at LynxCase, really makes very detailed databases, it's also key to simplify it, because if it's not simple, it won't be used in clinical practice, so the impact of your solution is limited. So the simplicity is really key if you want to implement a health tech solution in hospitals. You have to make sure that physicians and key stakeholders within the hospital really understand the value of your solution, and that's, in order to make it understandable, you have to simplify it. Consistency is, for me, it's really important. If you build up a database or if we as LynxCase build up databases for the hospitals always stay in control of the data. They are the guardian of the data. The patient is the owner of the data. But as we work in different hospitals with LynxCase, but also in different countries, the consistency for us is really important, meaning that we always use the same data models. We always use the same coding systems, because if you make sure that you have that consistency, you also can leverage value between hospitals, meaning that hospital A can benchmark or share knowledge with hospital B and so forth. And if you don't have any consistency with regards to data, this will become very difficult in the future. And third one, and to finish it off, is transparency. What I mean with transparency is if you visualize data or your algorithm is making a certain decision, you really have to make sure that there's a full trace back principle on how the algorithm worked. For example, in our case, if we extract medical data points or complications from medical records, we always have a full trace back principle where a physician can drill down to the original source document to make sure that the algorithm is right, because everybody speaks about AI, and AI is very promising, but you have to train it in a way, of course, that it delivers quality data. And in order to train it, you have to implement, of course, feedback from experts, and the experts are and the people working in hospitals. So a short recap of my small pitch of today is I just want to make sure that because of the transformation from a volume to a value-based system, data in healthcare is increasingly important. And what we see as well is tomorrow's healthcare will be based on data. So the fact that we are processing and structuring a lot of data, and we are generating databases for each hospital in the same way so they can share knowledge, in our opinion, is the first step to enable personalized medicine. So based on your own structural, so everybody speaks about genetics, but you also want your phenotyping, so your medical history, for example, structured. And the combination of both will really accelerate the fact that people can make the right decisions for you based on your personal profile. Of course, you want to improve the quality of care in a value-based healthcare system, really important. For us, it's also important to help accelerate the development and access to new therapies. So just to give you an example, if we see in a lot of hospitals, for example, in heart failure, that for a specific type of population group, we have really bad outcomes, so high mortality, high readmission, then these are areas of innovation. And this is where hospitals should work together with the life science industry to share these insights in order to develop new therapies that can then be leveraged to increase the outcomes and the overall quality of care. And then last one, of course, is we want to enable value-based healthcare, and in order to do that, a lot of data needs to be processed. Today, it's mainly done manually, and this is where LynxCase comes in, where we develop smart algorithms to do the data extraction automatically. Yes, this was in short a little bit what I want to share about the healthcare system, where our solution and our technology fits in, and I'm really open to further questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Dries. That was very interesting to see how you work with artificial intelligence on unstructured data, on structured and unstructured data. Before we move to the questions in the Q&A, I have one question for you, because I want to focus. You were focusing on LynxCase, on the technology, eventually on the partners and so on. But I can imagine that some companies or some type of companies can have a lot of benefits working with unstructured data or working with your solutions. I think, for instance, about payers, right? So maybe not in Belgium because it's government owned, but for instance, the Netherlands, so it's more market related. It's more market. It's more run like a market, right? And then you see that payers may really like your solutions because they can benchmark, let's say, one hospital compared to another hospital, or they can reduce cost, or they can, if you mentioned there 50 euros for a history of a patient. So if you can improve the quality, let's say, of the service of a provider by just 50 euros, focusing on the history of a patient, I would probably work with you. On the other side, I think that a lot of providers might be careful working with you because they can be benchmarked. The quality of their hospital may be benchmarked by let's say a standard of a number of best practice hospitals and so on. So how is the reaction there, and how do you see that working?
Yeah, that's a really interesting topic, of course, because sometimes in the beginning of the company, of course, hospitals say, okay, this will generate a lot of transparency in the healthcare ecosystem. But what you have today, and to come back to your question about the interest of payers, is you have, for example, in the Belgian government, published a few years ago a report on the quality of hip replacement in Belgium. Mm-hmm. And then you had individual hospitals that were scored on, for example, the revision rate, which is how many times do you have to revise a certain surgery, so that there's something happened which isn't successful. The problem, however, is, and where a lot of hospitals at that moment were really anxious, is that if you make that, that the decisions or that the benchmarking of quality, for example, and outcomes is unclear. And what I mean with that, and this is actually a value proposal as well with LynxCase to work with hospitals, is the best defense against bad data is having better data. If you, for example, see a hospital where the results are a little bit less than other hospitals, if they choose, of course, to benchmark themselves, you have to go into detail and to understand why this is the case. And if you're, for example, are a hospital that doesn't work with LynxCase and you don't have the level of detail concerning how complex are your patients, how many comorbidities do your patients have that you treat, then it's really difficult. And this is what we call case mix in more clinical terms. The case mix is really important to objectivize quality indicators. And if you don't have the level of detail in your clinical database, then of course it's really a problem if they start comparing your hospital with another hospital, because eventually you can't compare those results if you don't know the type of patient population that really gets treated into the hospital. Okay. If I'm, for example, a hospital and I only will do surgery on healthy patients, I will have very good results. And for example, the government in Belgium is going to publish a list and I will be on top of the list. But actually, this is not really where we have to go to. We have to make sure that we have much more data to make those decisions and to compare apples with apples. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you very much. A very, very interesting answer. Ijeoma, I'll leave the floor to you. Do you have some questions from the Q&A?
Yes, thank you, Professor Wim. Thank you, Dries, for your great insights on the topic. I have a question from Namdar. His question is it possible to predict specific diseases such as cancer or infectious disease by AI accurately? Mm-hmm. And is it needed in specific data mining projects?
Yeah, so this is actually, and I can come back on this. So what we essentially do with LynxCase is we make sure that the biggest problems, for example, to develop AI-driven prediction tools, clinical decision support, but also in radiology, for example, to make algorithms that mimic the process of a radiologist in looking scans, is having curated data. So they really need good, structured, granular data in order to develop or to predict things. And what we do with LynxCase, we increase the availability of good, granular and quality data. And then we partner up in some cases with companies that are interested in developing, for example, an algorithm that is going to reduce heart failure, or to predict, for example, in heart failure, whether or not you will be readmitted in 30 days. We as a company, we won't build that intelligent layer. We just make sure that the data is there, so other companies or university hospitals or non-academic hospitals that are into data science can develop their own algorithms based on their own data. And this is where LynxCase comes in. We will never predict certain diseases because this is another type of business. Our core business is really making sure that the databases are there to do these types of algorithms. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Leila Ahmadpour. Do you gather data on supporting technologies as well? For example, data about impact of use of a new technology on caregiving practices?
I'm not sure that I completely understand the question, but if I can elaborate on this, is what we, for example, are doing with specific hospitals is now more and more hospitals, for example, are more and more cautious about the patient experience and making sure that they get good outcomes at a reasonable cost. And so hospitals are also already thinking value-driven, and they implement new treatment pathways within their process. And this is where caregivers, first line, second line, third line, are coming together to make sure that a more holistic approach is being supported between caregivers with a patient-centric kicker. So around the patient, they are going to control as much as possible the different steps in the patient pathway. And what we do over there then with LynxCare is we analyze the baseline, so the standard of care before implementing a new patient pathway, and then we compare the impact that a new patient pathway really generates in terms of outcomes. So this is what we do. Yeah.
Okay, a question from Glenn Imbang. Will value healthcare system be effective in developing countries where traditional healthcare system is still prevalent?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. And then in developing countries, and you see a lot of healthcare innovation, for example, in Africa. And why is that? And the biggest or a good example is it's a little bit with the phone, and they directly switch to mobile phones, which of course we had a transition. We had first other phones, etc., and now we have mobile phones where we can go on the internet. I think the same will happen in developing countries in terms of the use of healthcare data as well, and the use of algorithms. I think they have a huge potential over there because often you have a big population. You have certain key players that have a lot of knowledge. So the knowledge should be translated into algorithms to make sure that a lot of people get access to new therapies. And this is really where healthcare and data can play a crucial role in accelerating, for example, access to new therapies and making sure that the overall quality of care, of course, in those countries directly is being optimized. So yes, I definitely see a role of IT, health AI in those countries. Yes.
Okay. Another question from Luca Remotti. He wants to know how you deal with legacy data sets.
Yeah, so that's an important one. What we often do when we start working with new hospitals is we go back in time. So we look normally from, sometimes we go 10 years back in time, or 5 years or 3 years. And those legacy data sources, what we do over there, and because we have the technology to do so, if it's digital, then we can process it and analyze it. You have to know that a lot of medical knowledge is stored within the last 10 years in a digital format, but it's just in the legacy HR systems. And what we do is we have developed technology to extract those data sources and to make sure that we can generate databases on top of them, so that knowledge from the past becomes directly insightful. And this is a major asset of our company, yes.
Okay. Alireza Talebi says, thank you for the great presentation. He lives in Canada and would like to know the current trend of using data analytics models in healthcare system in North America. How common the hospitals and governments are using such tools, that's a value-based healthcare, for example, in their current practice? Yeah,
so value-based healthcare, and there are already, for example, you have good examples in North America that value-based healthcare, because they have private insurance companies. It's the same as in Netherlands. They are a little bit, they are, for example, leading the way a little bit in terms of value-based healthcare, because you have a commercial model behind it, a commercial business model. So you will see a lot of payers already generate data analytics and reports to make sure that they can benchmark, to make sure that they can make value-based agreements with certain life science companies or with healthcare organizations. So there it's already implemented. So the vision and the protocols are there. But what we see over there, because we have some clients as well in the US, is that they still lack really the granularity of data. So they can benchmark on 3 to 5 KPIs, for example, but not on 10, 20 KPIs. So to really make a difference and to really accelerate into value-based healthcare, more data should become available to do so. And this is where we still see a lot of opportunities by using our text mining and machine learning techniques to make sure that we can do so. Yeah.
Okay. We have another question from Jian Lu. Her question is, she has a question on data sharing interface and privacy. Mm-hmm. What kinds of data sharing interface do you have between the hospitals and your company? Do the hospitals process the data to disguise personal information before sharing data with you? Mm-hmm. Do you propose the data sharing interface boundary or the hospital decide it? How do you, the hospital, and you ensure the privacy of patients in the data sharing process?
Yeah, that's a really important point and a really good question as well. It depends a little bit country on country. So everybody knows GDPR in Europe and HIPAA in the US. They already have basic guidelines on how you can work with healthcare data as well, with primary use for the quality of care, but also secondary use for research and so forth. We position ourselves towards hospitals. In that case is that we are a sub-processor for the hospital. So we process data for a hospital. And what's really important to highlight is in terms of the interface of data sharing, we install a gateway within a hospital, and the hospital can control what data goes out and what goes in. So it's really important that if you set up collaborative or federated data networks with hospitals, that in every situation, the hospital stays in control of their own data, because they are the guardian that is responsible for to make sure that the way they use data is in an optimal way. Of course, the only real owners of data are the patients themselves. But today, hospitals, of course, they govern all the data that is inside their systems, and data processing companies or platforms like ours, we have to comply with the processing agreements that are in place with the hospital, as well with the underlying data governance structure. So we as a company can't decide to share information from a hospital or benchmark one hospital with another. This is something that hospitals should decide themselves. We can't make that decision as a company. Yeah.
Okay, we have another one from Shilpa Ramachandran. Her question is, recently there has been a lot of questions raised on how effective any drug works based on gender. Would you be looking into collaborating with pharmaceuticals focusing on gender-based drug delivery?
Yeah, exactly. That's also a very interesting point. And this is what you see over here is enabling personalized medicine. And this is a little bit a use case, of course, that comes into play over there. There's a lot of, with life science companies, they really need real world evidence. So the databases that we build up for hospitals, this is of course really important for life science companies, because the more and more they engage with payers, or for example with the Belgian government, they have a managed entry agreement, meaning that they get reimbursed with a certain amount of money, but they have to demonstrate with local data in 3 years that they generate the value or the outcomes with their products in the Belgian market. So there, of course, a collaborative model between life science companies and hospitals should come into place. And it's really important whether it's drug delivery, like in your example, or for example, a new stent that is being used. It's really important to get innovation to the right type of patients as well. And this is often a problem. For example, a pharmaceutical company, they develop a product in rare diseases, and this is a case that we know quite well. But the problem in Belgium is that but not in Belgium, globally, is that there is an underdiagnosis of those rare disease patients. So it's really difficult to find them. So we have a solution, but we don't know where the patients are. And this is where data comes in place. And this is also importance, and that's what we say to hospitals as well, is why we help them in processing much more data, so that the moment a new therapy comes into the market that can change someone's life, that the right patients directly can be identified, so the hospital can act upon it. And this is really, really important. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Dries, we have 21 questions, so we cannot solve them all.
You can send them afterwards to me, Wim. Share my email, and I'll be happy to answer them all individually. Yeah.
I will send the emails. I will send the questions to you, and then we can see how we're gonna solve the problem, right? So, but anyway, so thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. It gives us an insight, let's say, in something which is quite new. So unstructured data in medical applications, what you can do with it, what kind of implications it has for the ecosystem in healthcare. So you gave us some interesting insights there, a lot of nice questions we had, so and a number of beautiful answers you gave us. But it's time to go to the next speaker. So thanks again, Dries, and hopefully we can work on the questions again. But it's time to move to Tim Dawkins.